everyone, and welcome to Coproduce Care's live streams. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Donna Campbell, and we'll be talking about everything local government and social care ombudsman related. So if you don't know who they are and you want to know who they are, then stick around. We'll be talking about their remit, about the cases that they see to, about the type of people that they can represent and support, and of course their report, which has been released recently, only in September, so quite hot off the press, the annual review of adult social care complaints. But they do so much more than just look at people's complaints. They are quite a supportive organisation. So we'll be talking about what they do in their remit and some of the things that they want to see coming out of their experiences of dealing with so many complaints. Who are the complaints coming from? What are councils doing? What are independent organisations doing? And how can they support social care providers in dealing with their complaints and making sure that their complaint system is really effective, so that actually people don't have to go to the Ombudsman. They can sort out complaints within their organisation. So we'll be talking a lot about that and everything that the Lg Seo does. But also, I wanted to just let you know about something that we're doing in Coproduce Care, and that's to do with talking about the vaccine, or the potential of there being a vaccine that's going to be rolled out. And of course, that's all about COVID-19, and on the face of it, it's a fantastic good news story. It's something that we can be pleased about, that we can look forward to. But on the grapevine, I heard that actually there's a little bit of reticence around it. And although it's a fantastic, headline, do we know enough about it? People are asking, what can it do? Does it interact with any other health conditions that I have? And actually within social care itself, people want to know more information. So what we thought we'd do is to help social care leaders and decision makers provide the right information for people so that they can make an informed decision of when, on how and whether to take the COVID-19 vaccine when it becomes available. We've done a questionnaire, which one of my colleagues will put in the chat. But if you go onto our website, coproducecare.com, we have, it's on there as well. You'll see it on one of the tabs. And basically, we are just going to collate as much information as possible around what people feel they need to know about the vaccine and what would be useful to know about it, and actually whether they feel that from what they know already that they will actually take the vaccine. So we'll do that information. We're not just going to keep it and it's going to sit there doing nothing. We're also going to share it with local authorities, and we will share it with decision makers in health and social care, and hopefully they'll use it to help provide information that makes people feel confident about it. So we're trying to get as many responses as possible. At the moment, or when I checked last night, the response was interesting. So I think it was about 50, just over 56% of people said that they were happy to take the COVID-19 vaccine. Of course, it's based on the little information that we know at the moment. And then the other 40+% said that they were not happy to take the COVID-19 vaccine based on what they know at the moment. So it does show that there is work to be done. So we're just trying to highlight those issues. And of course, the questionnaire that we have is just for people who use social care services. It's because obviously that's kind of what we talk about on for Coproduce Care. But that does include social care, not just social care workers, but social workers and occupational therapists. So do feel free to share the link so we can get as many responses as possible, because I don't know how else the government or local authorities are going to find out what their social care worker populations need to know. Okay, so that's enough on that. So we're going to bring in Donna very shortly. I'm going to try and get through this without coughing too much. I have got a very bad cough. It's not COVID, but do stick with me. So just a bit on the local government social care ombudsman. So we want to talk about, who can make a complaint, how they can make it. Are there any remedies and recommendations? And of course, we want to talk about the report that was released recently, but also just to explain that the Ombudsman also describes itself as the one-stop shop for complaints about publicly and privately funded services. And it's one of the only Ombudsman schemes to publish every social care decision that they make, which is really interesting. And I'll explore that a bit in a moment. And we'll go into the detail of what the review shows, and some of the issues that they're concerned about, including that there's a sort of plateauing of complaints. I think they were rising for a few years, and now they're plateauing. So that's a cause for concern, in that, do enough people know how to complain, and are we publicising what the role of the Lg Seo is enough? So that's the whole purpose really of this live stream. Of course, we'll take clips and a lot of people do watch it back afterwards, and we'll share some information there. But I don't know if we have anything to bring up one of the clips that I sent through recently, from the report. Here it is. So this is one of the decisions that you can find out from the Lg Seo. So the decisions that they make, they publicize them, as I just explained, and they are one of the only ombudsmans to do that. So they're very transparent. So this is just a random one we've picked out. So to show you as an example, so Mrs. X had a complaint against her counsel, who she said had failed to do what they'd agreed, and they'd closed her previous complaint as it had failed to clearly address her eligibility for care and support under the Care Act. So that is one of the things that that's an example of, a case that they do look at, and they look at these things in more detail. So we're going to go through that a bit later. But I'm going to bring in Donna now. Hello, Donna.
Hi, Sophie.
How are you today?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Not too bad. It's a bit grey outside where I live, but could be worse.
I think it's grey everywhere at the moment, to be honest. You're not on your own there. Typical autumnal weather. It's lovely to have you on. I've wanted to have you on for so long, ever since we had a training session, well, my organisation did, with the Lg Seo must be over a year ago now.
Yeah, last year.
Yeah,
last year, last summer.
Right. So again, that's another thing that we can talk about that you also provide. But maybe we could start off by you just explaining your role and a little bit about the organisation.
Okay, thank you. Well, as Sophie said, I'm Donna Campbell, and I'm an assistant ombudsman at the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman. I have the lead for adult social care. I've been a qualified social worker for over 30 years. And I joined the Lg Seo 10 years ago when we had increased powers to look at complaints about self-funders. So I've got a background steeped in adult social care, and a number of the investigators at the Lg Seo do also. Ombudsman world is a world that is not known to a lot of people, so any opportunities we have like this for spreading the word, we very much welcome. So the Local Government Ombudsman has been around for nearly 50 years, and broadly, we deal with all complaints about council services where people remain dissatisfied. So we deal with planning, highways, education, children's services. We deal with all council services. But obviously what we're talking about today is specifically adult social care. And part of the reason we're talking about that is 10 years ago, with the 2009 Health Act, we had increased powers to look at complaints of self-funders. Prior to that, it was identified that there was a gap, because if your services were publicly funded, you could go to a council and seek independent redress through that channel. But people who funded their own care had nowhere else to go after their care provider had investigated any concerns that they might have had. So we stepped in there, and as Sophie said, we are the one-stop shop for all adult social care complaints, whether they're publicly or privately funded.
Thank you. Really helpful. And I wanted to explore a little bit about your report. So you do an annual report on the complaints that you receive, and presumably that includes different reports for the different parts of the services that you are Ombudsman for.
Yeah, we do 2 annual reports. We do a general annual report, which covers all our jurisdictions, so some of the areas I was just talking about. But annually, we also do a specific adult social care report, and that's the one that we published in September. So this year, what we do when we do the report is give some statistics as to the number of cases we've investigated, how many have been upheld, all those sorts of things. And then we also signpost to some specific complaints that we've looked at. So this year, it was nearly 3,100 complaints and inquiries that we received, and of those, only 430 were about self-funders, so about private care providers. And this is a concern to us, because over the last few years, we've seen the numbers of complaints from self-funders plateau. Now, it could be that's because everyone's having fantastic care and there is no need to complain to us, but we rather feel it's more to do with people not knowing that we exist, and that perhaps care providers not always signposting individuals to us at the end of their process. So that's one of our concerns, that people just are not being signposted to us. And as a result of that, we have asked for the government for what's known as mandatory signposting, and that would be where care providers have to signpost to us at the end of their process. At the moment, it's something that CQC will measure and will look at, but it's not mandatory. And we feel that that's not only the right thing to do for people who want to make a complaint, but also for care providers, because at the moment, the more mature care providers who do as they should do, they're under more scrutiny, if you like, than those care providers who maybe aren't signposting and therefore aren't being held accountable for things that may be going wrong.
So basically, there's this kind of hierarchy. So people have the opportunity to actually, it's optional. So you don't have to signpost people to the Lg Seo, but of course you can do. And presumably providers or people who even know who that is an option, they will put that onto their complaints procedures or on their website. But it's not just awareness. You need something more for people to actually do that, so that you can really get a good, true picture of how people are supported.
That's what we think. Obviously, often with these things, you'd rather go at it with a carrot rather than a stick, and to get buy-in that way. But we just feel that we almost have no option but to go down this road, because as we say, as we've seen, that the number of complaints about private care has plateaued, whereas the number of complaints we've received from councils around adult social care have been increasing. So we don't think there's that big of a distinction without some explanation, really. The other thing to highlight from the report was the upheld rate. So of all the adult social care complaints that we investigated, 69% were upheld. And of that, the ones that were about private care providers, 71% were upheld. So that's a really high uphold rate in terms of what we're seeing, which also gives us confidence to believe that it's not about all the people receiving private care services being satisfied with what they're receiving. It is a case, I think, of they don't know that we exist.
So definitely a lack of awareness. So that we can kind of give a picture of what do you mean by a recommendation? How do you get to a recommendation? And actually, who can lodge a complaint? Can I just have an issue with a care provider and just straight away go to yourselves, or do I have to follow a certain procedure if I'm a family member or somebody who's receiving care, if I'm not happy with what the local authority or provider is doing?
Right. So the starting point is you have to have exhausted the council or the care provider's complaints procedure. So you can't just come to us. It is a matter of we believe that most things are resolved properly at a local level. So the legislation says that you have to go to the person providing your care in the first instance. Once you have done that, if you remain dissatisfied, then anybody can come to us. We can take a complaint from an individual who's been affected, or with consent from a relative. Care providers can come to us if they feel that, you know, something that they're dealing with isn't being resolved. It can often be a good line in the sand for a care provider to come to us. So we're open to anybody in a way coming to bring a complaint. We're impartial. We're neither on the side of the complainant or the care provider or the council. So we're going to look at things objectively, and we're going to make our decisions on an evidence base. And the very important thing to say is we're free. So there's no cost to coming to us. So that shouldn't be an obstacle for people making a complaint to the Ombudsman. So once a complaint arrives with us, there are 3 stages to how we would go about an investigation. The first stage is would be with our intake team, who take all new referrals, and people. We're mainly encouraging complaints being made through our website. There's a complaint form on our website, but we do also take complaints by the phone or old-fashioned writing in if you want to. So once our intake team has received a complaint, they will log it. They will make sure that the complaint is in the right place, because we do get some random complaints about gas boards and various other things. So they'll do a check to make sure that it's in the right place. After those initial initial information is taken, it will go on to one of our assessment teams, and they will deal with an investigation if it can be dealt with quickly. So there may be some things that are jurisdictionally not for us, in which case it will be our assessment team that somebody would get that response. Or if it's something that can be resolved very quickly, for instance, within 20 working days, our assessment team will deal with it. It is then those cases that come on to one of our 9 investigation teams where we really get into the detail of a complaint. So our starting point would normally be to make contact with the complainant, to hear from their point of view what the complaint is all about, to ask them if they've got any information that they want to share with us. So that is really key, that initial conversation, just so that we can explain to the complainant what it is we're going to be able to achieve for them, manage any expectations, and also hear directly from them what it is that is concerning to them. Once we've done that, we'll agree a summary of complaint, and that's really important as well, particularly where it's somebody who's got a lot of issues that they want to complain about. We need to make sure that the investigation is focused on those issues, and therefore agreeing a complaint summary is really crucial. We will then start the complaint in earnest then, which will normally start with us doing what's known as making inquiries. So we will contact a care provider or a council, and we will ask a range of questions around the complaint that we're investigating. And those questions may include asking for documentation, for policies and procedures, or other things that we will need to look at in order to establish whether anything has gone wrong. So once we've gathered in that information, the key things that we are looking for is whether anything has gone wrong and whether that fault has led to an injustice. And the injustice is really key because it is the impact on how something has affected somebody that is really what we're looking to try and remedy. So we try and put the person back into the position they would have been in if there hadn't been anything going wrong. And so when we look at remedies, those are the sorts of things we'll look at. So once we've looked at the information that we've gathered, we use a process where we look at what should have happened. So that might be looking at what the law says, what the any published guidance, what the own council or care providers guidance and procedures say. That is the what should have happened. We will then look at what did happen, so what the complainant has told us has happened, or indeed what the care provider and counsellor said this happened. And then we will look at the two and think, well, was there any fault leading to injustice here? So that's the bit that the investigator will analyse to see whether they can come to a conclusion.
That is just such a wonderful, comprehensive description of beginning to end of that process. So that very
I
much
hadn't quite got to the end, so I might want to just get to the.
Well, I was hesitating at end. I was hesitating when I was going to say end because I thought, well, that's not quite there, but it is enough, isn't it? For just that was a good stint.
Well, I'll come back. I will come back and talk about some remedies and what happens at the end of the process. But no, I'll take any questions, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And questions is a very good point for me to remind people, if you are watching live and you do have a question, pop it in the chat and we will ask Donna to address that. But you clarified a lot of the questions I was going to ask anyway, to be honest, because I wanted to ask about the fact that one of the focuses is injustice. So the difference between going to the Ombudsman and judicial review might be the fact that you're not just looking at the process or procedure, you're actually looking at putting people back to what would have happened, like you said, if there was an injustice, you want to put them back to a position that they would have been if that didn't happen. So that's really useful. And also the person-centered approach of the Lg Seo, because it's not just like when you're at a tribunal and you have to gather a load of paperwork. Presumably, obviously, that's part of your evidence, but you're actually looking at experiences, you're looking at talking to people and finding out what's happened for them. And I think that speaks to some of the remedies that have occurred, because you've really got to understand what went wrong for that person. And it's just not a simple prescriptive, right, this happened, so you lost this much economically, so that's what you get as a remedy. So before we go on to that, I just want to go back to the example that I put up. If I can find it again from Somerset Local Council. Now, I didn't take a screenshot of all of this, but you made so your finding on this one was that the Ombudsman upheld the complaint and found fault causing injustice, which you explained, and then it says the recommendations were that you recommended the council write to apologise to Miss X and pays her £250 for the trouble it has put her to in pursuing her complaints, and that the council needs to update its assessment for Miss X so that it includes a clear decision on eligibility as required by the Care Act. And I've noticed most of it comes under people or local authorities not applying the Care Act properly, so that will be interesting to a lot of people. And there were some other things that people can look on the website on that, including that the council had to update its guidance and inform assessors properly, and so on. So I'll take that down. So I wanted to, if you could just kind of explore a little bit more about the recommendations, and also what happens if you have a local authority, or it could be a care provider or anybody because they are recommendations. It's quite different from saying, you have to do this. Or
that's a very good point. Yeah.
Penalty. So could you just explore that a little bit with us?
Okay. So when we've done our analysis and an investigator has come to some conclusions, we will first issue a draft decision. And that is an opportunity. That's our provisional view of what we think has gone wrong, and our provisional recommendations. And that gives an opportunity for the care provider or the council to come back to us and say, well, actually, we forgot to tell you this, or you've misinterpreted that. And so that's a genuine attempt to see whether we're in the right place before we finalise the decision. So what Sophie was just talking about was the sorts of recommendations that we might include in one of our decisions. And that can be anything from an apology, which is something that that's all some people want. It's an acknowledgement that something went wrong, and that, you know, as a result of our input, that they are now getting the apology they deserve. Or it could mean something like staff training, or a review and a change in procedures. So those are the sorts of recommendations that we, as well as any financial redress for the individual. But as Sophie said, our recommendations are not they're not statutory. People don't have to adhere to our recommendations. However, in 99% of the times, councils and care providers do. So we don't have an issue with people not adhering, and there are various processes that we go through if councils and care providers don't adhere to our recommendations. And they can be things like a public report if it's a council, or what's known as an adverse findings notice, which is one of the things that we can do with care providers if they don't adhere to our recommendations.
Great, that's really helpful. And of course, it's not just about injustice. There's maladministration, I believe, and service failure. So there's other things as well that you might look at. But in terms of the common issues that you find coming up, what are they? Are there any common issues? Maybe there's common things that providers are doing wrong, or common things that local authorities are doing wrong.
Well, there are various themes that we see time and time again. So for councils, assessment and care planning, financial assessments, they're common themes. For care providers, the quality of care issues are often ones that come up. And that can range from, you know, mum or dad is being given tea and he only drinks coffee, to, you know, a whole range of things leading to allegations of abuse and neglect. So the quality of care issues covers a wide span, and that can be both residential and domiciliary in terms of the care that's being issued. Charging is always a hot topic. Charge, especially where somebody maybe has started out as a self-funder and then their money runs out, and then getting the council to take on the care, whether that means somebody has to move. One of the things in terms of care providers that we often see is lack of clarity in their contracts and lack of communication with individuals about what is expected. So those are some of the common themes. I was looking at a complaint recently about somebody who had been they'd been into respite care, and they'd been there for 2 months, but the complaint was from the person's wife, and she was talking about the fact that there had been no the catheter hadn't been changed, that he'd had no dental care, i.e. having his help with his brushing his teeth on a daily basis, that the care home had been using a hoist to transfer him when he didn't need it, and that was causing pain. So there was quite a lot of issues there, which the irony being, of course, that it was a respite care. So the very person who was bringing the complaint was supposed to be getting a rest from her husband being in a care home. And we upheld that complaint, and we found that that the catheter hadn't been emptied, that there had been poor care given throughout the time. And it was for that sort of complaint, for the individual, we did ask for an apology because obviously things went very wrong. We did also ask for a refund for some of the fee because they were paying for a service that they didn't get. And we also asked for some staff training around things like catheter and dental care. So some basic things really in that complaint for me, that shouldn't have been going wrong, but is a daily experience for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really helpful example because the remedy that you suggested seems entirely reasonable under the circumstances. So that's very helpful. And in terms of the kind of issues that you have where providers bring cases against issues with local authorities, do you find that very common at all?
It's not very common, and it's a tricky area for us sometimes because often it's around about the level of funding that local authorities are giving to care providers to carry out commissioned care, and that's an area that the courts have been the better place to deal with those sorts of things previously. And there have been some case law where different organisations, different care providers have grouped together and taken various councils to court successfully. So we sort of feel that that's probably a better route for that sort of complaint.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. In terms of any overlaps, because you deal with those safeguarding issues as well. Obviously, you've got local safe SAR boards, safeguarding adult boards. Do you find that you have to work with these organisations, or do you do your work separately?
Well, as I said before, we are independent, and there are some overlaps, but for instance, on safeguarding, councils are the have lead responsibility for dealing with safeguarding issues. So we would hold the council to account if there was a safeguarding issue, because it's generally at the level of either it was an inappropriate referral or the safeguarding investigation didn't go far enough, those sorts of things, which we can look at. And we would look at those against what good practice dictates around safeguarding and a safeguarding process. And we would say, well, yes, this council should have started the initial look earlier, or they should have had a call together multidisciplinary team earlier, those sorts of things where there are time frames linked to what good practice looks like. What we wouldn't deal with would be the merits of the outcome. So it wouldn't be for us to say the council should have concluded that X was being abused. That would be for the professionals who had all the information at the time. So in terms of what we can look at, we don't tread on the toes and look at the merits of a decision that has been properly made. And we're very clear about that.
And what about the overlap with CQC? Because I think a lot of people think that when you have a complaint to do with health and social care, the buck stops with CQC, and everybody knows the Care Quality Commission, our regulator, but they don't consider your organisation. So do you have? Is there any interface between them? Are there any complexities around that, or is it quite a clear, even cut between why people would go to yourselves instead of CQC, or could people go to both?
I think people are confused, if I'm honest. I think people, because CQC are the regulators, and because, if you like, they're the known body, that people would automatically think that if they've got an issue, it would be CQC that they should turn to. But we're very clear that CQC are the regulators. They look at the whole issues to do with the whole home, and they're the appropriate body to do that. We look at individual complaints. So if somebody wants redress on their own specific matter, then CQC won't be able to do that for them. They need to come to us. But we recognise ourselves and CQC that, you know, there is confusion at times. And so we work together. We have a memorandum of understanding and an information sharing agreement where we do share information. So if we look at an individual complaint and we feel that there may be wider issues, then we will refer that complaint to CQC, refer that decision rather to CQC, so that they can see what we've been doing, and they can use that then as part of their own intelligence gathering for when they do an inspection. We do also have a system whereby if somebody rings CQC up, or indeed if they ring us up, it works the other way around as well, and it's more appropriate for the other organisation, we can directly pass on that call. It's not a case of saying to the individual, oh, you've rang the wrong place, redial the LGO. We can have a direct transfer to the organisation. So that we put that in place because we recognise that people do sometimes get confused as to which organisation to go to, and we just felt that that would be helpful in making sure that a complaint landed in the right place.
That's really helpful, and you've just answered the question that I was going to ask anyway. I also want to pick out another complaint outcome from the report. There's quite a lot in here, so I don't know if people can read it. But this was your investigation that you did for multiple failings at a care home owned by and operated by a local council, including with a safeguarding investigation undertaking following the death of a resident, and that you found the council failed to properly investigate a series of falls suffered by the woman, and there were serious shortfalls in its care planning around falls management and in its monitoring of her weight and nutrition. And what you then asked the council to do is to apologise to the woman's brother who brought the complaint, make a payment to a charity of his choice, and pay for a memorial for the woman, such as a tree or park bench. And it also agreed to review its procedures to improve adult trials of care assessments, audit trials, and conducts a wholesale review of its adult safeguarding procedures. So I quite like that one because it shows how it was quite person-centered in the remedy, but also it looked at the procedures and the audit trails and everything else. So it was quite a holistic way of looking at it, in fact.
And that's exactly what we aim to do. I mean, when we make recommendations, we do make them person-centered, and that's why we look at the injustice. So we look at what the impact is for that individual. So it is quite possible that two people will come to us with a similar sort of complaint, but because there are individual differences and the impact that that complaint has had on the individual might mean that the recommendations are slightly different. But I suppose the other thing to pick up looking at that, at the recommendations that you've just put up, is that whilst we do look to remedy the individual's injustice, we do also ask for service improvements that hopefully will help other people. So a service improvement that is around staff training or that is about reviewing safeguarding procedures doesn't just have an impact on that one individual. It hopefully going forward would prevent the same sort of thing happening again. We can also, as part of our legislation, we can look at what's known as other people similarly affected. So if we had a complaint from a care home about something, let me think, that was, say, about medication, and we established that medication wasn't being given out in the appropriate way. We could also say, well, we're going to look at how other people in that care home have been affected by medication, and we could ask the care provider to give us information relating to other people who have been similarly affected. So our role does go broader. Even though it starts off with an individual complaint, we can actually influence and impact what services other people are receiving.
That's really helpful. And what I want to move on to now is the supportive functions of the Lg Seo, because it's not just about obviously individual cases, but as I explained in my other job, I work as a care provider, and you offer training to care providers and presumably to local authorities as well.
Definitely.
But I think dealing with complaints is there's no really template that people can kind of do their own procedures and generally follow the same ones. And I know the CQC does advise on certain ways to do that, but you actually provide documents that are helpful and accessible. So along with the training and those documents, can you talk about the support that you provide to care providers specifically?
Yeah, well, as you say, we've got a range of information on our website. You said at the outset that we were one of the few ombudsmen who publish all our decisions. All our decisions are on our website, and that can be a good way of learning, actually, from a care provider's point of view and for a member of the public, because they can search our website, and there are various ways you can search for different categories and that to see whether somebody has brought a similar complaint, or from a care provider's point of view or a council's point of view, you can see what sorts of remedies that we might go for on a particular issue. So our decisions are on our website, and we also have a range of tools that care providers could use in terms of template letters for dealing with complaints, as you've just got up now, frequently asked questions that care providers might want to consider, and just things that might help them in getting a consistent and transparent way of dealing with complaints. I suppose one of the other things that I would like to touch on is how complaints are viewed by care providers and some councils, actually, that complaints are still seen in quite a negative way. And really, we would like to drum home the message that, care providers should embrace complaints, that they should be seen as free market research, as a way of getting intelligence about how things are operating within an establishment, rather than being seen as a defensive thing. And there's a whole range of ways in which a mature thinking organisation can value complaints. We never look at it in terms of a lot of complaints means that it's a poor service, because a lot of complaints could mean that care provider is actually being open about how to bring a complaint to us or to them. And that is a good thing. And I think care providers should feel that they should empower staff to listen, to hear complaints when they're being made, and to listen to what service users are saying, and not try to put them off raising things that maybe are important to them. So changing the mindset really around complaints would be something that I think mature organisations should be looking to do.
Lovely, thank you. That's really helpful. What about the training? Because I know I went on one last year, but there's another one that's more in depth that I'm trying to get onto next year. What's the training and courses that you put out for providers?
Well, we again, this is on our website if people want to find out in more detail. But we do two types of training, I suppose, although I must caveat all of this with of what we used to do in terms of going out to care providers and councils to do training, and what we're having to do now, like a lot of us working from home, is that we have just moved our training to an online offer. So we are still doing it, but we can either come to we can either do group training within your establishment. So, if you've got a number of managers who you want to be trained, we can do that. Or we can do what we call open courses, where there may be managers from various care homes and maybe some councils. And that's good because you're getting the experience of different people. But we train on effective complaint handling. So we'll take people through various case studies and scenarios around what they would do if certain things happen, how they would gather in information, how they might reach a decision, general communication during the process with care provider, with the complainant, and things like that, really. So we get excellent feedback about our training, and as I say, visit our website and you can find out. Alan Parks is our main lead on training. He'll be happy to hear from you.
That's really helpful, and it's good to think about using that process to help managers or providers understand that complaints can be obviously very difficult to manage, but actually if there is a process to learn about where it can be informative and supportive for both parties, the way that you seem to have resolved things in the cases that are online seems to be you're looking for not something that's going to solve all the ills or all the issues that there are, but to come to some kind of reasonable agreement between parties of how to make things better. And that's why I quite like that example I put up about how the local authority did remedy it for that person. Obviously, it's a horrible thing to go through and someone died in that situation, but it was really thoughtful. So I think I'm looking forward to the training next year, and it is good that you do offer it as well, because obviously you're trying to make it a situation where people don't have to go to that extent. They don't need to get in touch with you about their complaints. They can be dealt with locally.
Yeah, I think as well that what gives people confidence in making complaints is knowing that a care provider takes them seriously and can learn from the experience. So, we put a lot of store on learning from complaints. So it never looks good if we get the same sort of complaint from the same council or the same care provider, because then it just looks as though they're dealing with things, ticking things off individually, but not actually sharing the learning. And I think for care providers, if they can make sure that their staff know the outcomes of complaints, if they can make sure that their residents, where they're able, or relatives know that this is what happened, this is what we did about it, this is what we're going to do about it, then that gives individuals confidence in bringing a complaint. So I think those things are very important. And I came across a complaint we dealt with recently, where a care provider had failed to act when a resident had experienced racist behaviour. And without going into the ins and out of the case, one of the things that the care provider did as a result of our investigation is they held what they called a reflection workshop to discuss the learning from the complaint. And I thought that was really positive, that they had recognised that something had gone wrong. We'd made that clear that something had gone wrong. There was a personal remedy for the individual, but I thought it was good that the care provider had this reflection workshop where, there were things around equality issues that they needed to do in terms of staff training, but I thought the fact that they were reflecting on the learning from the complaint was really positive.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. And actually having those examples of how people are dealing with complaints and resolving them in doing things like that is really helpful. That's why I think it is quite good that you do publish those results. And you can actually sign up. People can sign up to the newsletter. And I know I get them in my inbox. So when I get a second, sometimes I do have a quick look through.
Yeah.
So that's quite useful as well. And I will just put the contact details just so people can get in contact. But it's on the website anyway. I just want to talk about in this last section around COVID, and obviously complaints I presume have gone up, or maybe they've gone down because people haven't even been thinking about the Lg Seo in all of this. What have you done differently because of the situation we're in at the moment, and have you seen complaints that come to you change?
it's interesting because I think we would have been remiss to have got through this session without mentioning COVID. I think the adult social care has been very much impacted by COVID in lots of ways. As an organisation, when the Prime Minister announced the first lockdown in March, we took the decision to pause investigations at that time because we wanted the concentration to be on the front line for both councils and care providers. So between March and the end of June, we paused investigations, and then we restarted in July. What we also introduced at that time a COVID team. So we've got a team of investigators who are dealing specifically with COVID complaints. And part of the reason behind that was so that we could start to develop understanding of what the themes were and also have a consistency of approach, because things were changing almost. Government guidance was often changing on almost a daily basis during, the main bit of the lockdown. So it was important that we kept on top of that, and that when we were judging a complaint, we were judging it against the appropriate guidance at the time. So we've got the team dealing with COVID complaints, and we are starting to get a number of, COVID complaints across the board, but specifically adult social care complaints. And it's quite early days and they're quite small numbers, but you'll not be surprised that one of the things that we're hearing a lot about is the lack of visiting. I think it's been a really difficult time for residents and relatives not being able to see their loved ones during this period, and that's had a massive impact on individuals. So we're starting to see complaints about that. We're starting to see things around hospital discharge, and where people were not at the early stages, not being tested for COVID before being placed back in residential care homes, and the spread of COVID. And I suppose it's appropriate for me to say at this stage that we have a joint working team as part of the Lg Seo, where we can look at complaints that, are in that interface between health and social care. So hospital discharge is a classic example of that. So we are starting to see some themes. There just seems to be something around poor communication. Now, I'm sure from a care provider's point of view, they had loads to look at during this period, but from a relative and a service user's point of view, there is something around poor comms and poor communication. So it's early days. What we hope to be able to do is gather intelligence from the investigations that we investigate around COVID, and we will publish some of that data in what we call a focus report, probably next year now.
That's really helpful. Are you able to tell us how you're going about resolving those issues that are coming up during COVID? Things like visiting or discharge. Is there anything that's either published that or anything you can talk about in terms of remedies and recommendations you're offering in these situations?
Not as yet. I mean, as I say, it's early days for some of those complaints, and we're going to have difficulties because, for instance, the visiting issues, whilst we might have personal and moral views as to, what has gone wrong, and we will look at individual situations because, yes, there was a blanket no visits for a period, but there was also a period where things could have happened. We'd also be looking to make sure that an individual, for instance, if it was an end of life, or if things could have been done with the use of PPE and taking appropriate measures. So we will look at these things. We won't just take a blanket approach of the government's guidance was X and therefore we can't look at it. We will look at individual cases to see whether care homes could have been a little bit more flexible about dealing with individual need.
And obviously that presumably also applies to local authorities as well.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So how long does it take to get a recommendation through, or to process the complaints that come to you?
How long does it take?
Yeah.
It varies really. We complete most of our investigations within 26 weeks. That's one of our targets. Things do sometimes take longer. You know, I've just been talking about a joint working complaint. You can imagine if you've got a CCG, a trust, a care provider, and a council involved in a complaint, that is going to take a lot longer. But we like to close everything within a year. But most complaints get dealt with within 26 weeks.
And do you have at all a government advisory role? So if you're doing these complaints all the time across the country, does the information or the findings or any issues within social care that come up or worry you, like you've reported in your report, do you share that with Department of Health and Social Care? Do they get involved? Do they take those into consideration? How does that work?
Yeah, we share our information as wide as we can with all who want to listen. But yes, we do have regular meetings with the Department of Health, basically sharing the learning from our complaints, because that's what we do, and that's all that we can do is share what we see. And I have regular meetings with the Department of Health, and it is that sort of intelligence. It's sharing the information that we've had, which hopefully informs things that they then decide to do.
Good. Okay, that's really helpful. And hopefully some of the things that you're looking at in terms of visiting and hospital discharge, that will also feed up to them. So I don't think that's anything else that we haven't covered. There were a couple of things we haven't put up, which we have prepared, which were some of the recommendations, how many to improve services for others. That's all in your report.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And then there's something also about the complaints and inquiries received, and how many were from people who funded their own care, which is what you discussed before.
Yeah.
And
as you say, that's all in the report. That's all on the website. If people want to access that and other things, they can look on our website. As soon as you go onto the website, it asks you if you want to receive the newsletter. And so, as you were referring to before, Sophie, and that if you sign up to that, then not only will you receive direct information from us about things, but it will also give you timely information as well. So I would recommend that.
Okay, that's really useful. Thank you so much for coming on today, Donna. I feel like we're going to make lots of clips of useful bits that you've said to help us understand what the role is and how you work and how people can use it across social care. You're not for any one part of social care. You're kind of looking at anyone can access you, looking at local authorities, looking at care providers, and the support that self-funders get as well. So that was really, really helpful. So thank you very much. And I know you've got a very busy day, very busy diary, so I will let you go.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And just as Beverly's pointed out, that your newsletter is very helpful. Thank you for reminding me that there is a newsletter there. So that was great. Thank you very much, Donna. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
So there you go. I hope you found that helpful. We are working on other live streams. We want to do one more before we close down for Christmas. Not going to close down for Christmas, but it's going to get a bit busier in social care. So that's where we're going to be using our resources. But if there's anyone you want to hear from, anything that you think would be useful to feature on the Coproduce Care live streams that we do, then do get in touch with us. You can follow us on Twitter. Of course, you can also subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already. And then if you're on Facebook or watching us on Facebook, then you can like our page and you can get involved with us there. And there's a lot on our website, so don't forget to go onto there, and you can sign up to our bulletins and updates there as well. So thank you everyone for joining us. Have a lovely rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Take care.